On this edition of Practical Probate, I'm going to be talking about Connecticut unclaimed property and the probate court. I'm Dom Calabrese. Since 1995, I've been a Connecticut attorney, and since 2003, I've been a Connecticut probate judge. I developed Practical Probate as a series of presentations and articles that are designed to give people information to make it less likely that they will be taken advantage of by unscrupulous purveyors of questionable estate planning and probate products. This presentation is for information purposes only, and it should not be relied upon, nor should it be construed as legal advice. For legal advice, you need to see a qualified attorney for your own situation. Many of you watching this may know that the Connecticut Department of the Treasurer has an unclaimed property department. And the unclaimed property that comes under the control of the state of Connecticut is frequently published and is available on their website. When someone has unclaimed property, they have to go through a process in order to get the property. Frequently, the owners of the unclaimed property have passed away. In that case, after going to the state treasurer, you have to bring the paperwork to the probate court, to the local probate court. And if you look at the state treasurer's website, they talk about the fact that one in a situation like that needs to get a probate certificate. And a lot of people who come to the probate court to get those certificates are surprised to learn that there is a process that the probate court needs to go through in order to issue a certificate like that. It's unfortunately not as simple as showing up at the probate court with your paperwork from the Connecticut treasurer and saying, here's can I have my certificate? So I'm going to talk for just a few minutes about what the probate court's function is in a situation like that. When someone in Connecticut or someone owning Connecticut property passes away, one of the functions of our Connecticut probate courts is to determine who the legal owners of the property are. Legal owners of the property that a decedent owned, that someone who passed away owned, generally fall into three categories. The heirs at law, those are usually the relatives of the deceased person, particularly if the deceased person didn't have a will. The beneficiaries of the deceased person, beneficiaries are persons named in a will to receive the assets of the person who passed away. And the third are creditors of the deceased person. When someone needs a certificate from the probate court in Connecticut for Connecticut unclaimed property, the court has to go through the process of determining just who the legal owners of those assets are. And it's not as simple as issuing on the spot a certificate for the person who shows up at the window at the probate court. So let me use a brief example to explain how this works. Let's say John White passed away several years ago. He had 3 children when he passed away, 3 adult children. He was a widower, he didn't have a spouse. So several years after he passes away and his estate is probated in the probate court, one of his adult children finds that there are assets that the state of Connecticut has in its possession that belong to Mr. White. So that adult child of Mr. White comes to the probate court with a certificate. What we have to do in the probate court is determine who the rightful owner of that asset is. So if there was an estate opened for Mr. White, we have to go back into that estate in the probate court and see what the circumstances were. Was there a will? Was there not a will? Were there creditors? Were the creditors paid? If the creditors weren't paid and it was an insolvent estate, we may have to go back and look at which creditors weren't paid in that situation. So that process generally takes quite a bit of time, and as you could probably appreciate, it's important that the legal owner of those assets gets them. So in the case of Mr. White, it wouldn't be proper generally for the surviving child, one of 3 surviving children, to get all of Mr. White's assets unless Mr. White's will provided for that. So that's why it's important to understand that there is a process in place in that situation with Connecticut unclaimed property, and what the probate court needs to do with you getting a certificate. Thank you.